One of the biggest issues you're going to run into when engineering music is masking. That's when two or more sounds are all competing for space by trying to occupy the same frequency range or position in the stereo field simultaneously. There's a lot of different approaches that mix engineers have used over the years to address this, but one of the most effective and innovative new approaches is called spectral ducking. If you haven't been using spectral ducking yet, you need to get to know this technique. I think it's going to be an absolute go-to going forwards from here, and a must-know technique to be able to get clear and transparent, precise mixes. Also, one of the other issues that comes up in production is when you're layering drums to try and get a fatter, bigger sound, but specifically with kick drums, when you layer them, a lot of times you get phase cancellation, and it can cause the drum to sound hollow, lose punch, lose integrity, or lose its body. There's a new plugin that came out called Fuser from Mastering the Mix, and it addresses all of these problems. Let's test it out in an actual mix project. I've got a mix spooled up, and I'd like to show you 3 of the ways that I've been using this to get better mixes. Let's hop into the session. Here's the song that we're going to be using to show these issues and techniques today. Big shout outs to the artists Will Henshaw and Ivo Heining for giving me permission to use this. And this is a song from a 10-track album called Oracles that I'm mixing and mastering. And it's an interesting project because they generated all of the vocals using AI. And specifically, they gave the AI special prompts to talk about itself and humanity and where it sees that relationship going. So the vocals are sometimes a little disconcerting and creepy, interesting, fascinating, intriguing. And let's have a listen to the song, or the first bit of the song. And what I want you to listen to is areas where there is frequency conflict going on, things that are stepping on each other in the mix that are impacting clarity. So have a listen for that, and let's check it out.
What is this thing called consciousness? Is it a gift or a curse? Is it a spark of divine light or a product of evolution's might? What is this thing?
So what are we hearing here? I'll tell you what I'm hearing. First and foremost, I'm hearing that the vocal is getting masked by some of the mid-range instrumentation. Specifically, there's a piano sound that is really dominant in the mid-range in the same area as the vocal, and it is also quite centered in the stereo field. It has a delay on it, which is feeding back and ringing out, and that also accentuates the issue. Then next I'm hearing that there is an issue with the kick drum. It's not punchy, it's not sounding as defined and clear as I'd like it. And then I'm hearing conflict between the kick and the bass. This is normal in almost any mix where ducking hasn't been applied yet to sidechain duck the bass to the kick. So that is an issue in this mix. And then I'm also hearing the snare is getting a bit lost as well. I like the crack of the snare to be able to come through, and rather than taking additive EQ and trying to boost the snare or compress it more, I like to move some things out of the way of the snare. So we're going to use some techniques to be able to solve each one of these issues. Let's hop in and get it done.
We question the status quo.
So let's start with this vocal masking issue and solve that first. We'll go into my submixes, and I have all the vocals routed into the Allvox submix. Then I have all of the mid-range instrumentation routed into this submix right here. Allows us to preview those together.
We are the beat poets of the digital age. We question the status quo.
So what we want to do here is add Fuser onto the submix that we want to duck or yield or be submissive to the dominant sound that we want to come through in the mix. And then we need to route that dominant sound, in this case the vocals, into the sidechain input of Fuser. And now what you're going to see in the spectrum display is a few different things that are very interesting. So one is you're seeing 2 overlaid spectrums. The dark gray spectrum in the background is the mid-range instrumentation that Fuser is on. And then the bright white spectrum is the sidechain signal, the vocal that's coming through. And then you're seeing all of these red, and in some cases you even will notice a few yellow lines popping in there. And these are similar to what you might be familiar with in FabFilter Pro Q3, which they call collisions. But in this case, these are areas of frequency conflict. They're conflict zones. And the red indicates frequency masking or conflict in the mid of the signal, because this is a mid-side encoded plugin. And the yellow, if you see any at all, indicate conflict in the sides of the signal. So that's something that I haven't seen before in a plugin. This type of visual implementation makes it very easy to see where exactly you're getting masking. So how do we go about solving this? We have these two sounds going on. First of all, I'm going to accentuate this. I'm just going to activate a +6 dB on the mid-range instrumentation so you can just really, really hear it stepping on the vocals and causing conflict. So all you do at this point is you let the plugin listen to the signal, and if you want to go the automatic route, which is very impressive, you just click Resolve Conflicts. And so what it's done now is it's inserted two EQ nodes, and these are not static EQ. These are dynamic nodes. And what each one of them is doing is causing spectral ducking within the zone that the subtractive bell is covering. You can click these and move them around and edit them if you want to, but out of the box, let's just play with that and see how it's going. So each one of these bells has a solo button. It's got a on-off. It's got remove this if you want to remove it. And then you'll notice that it also has a little M. So does this one. And because the frequency conflict in this setup is dominantly in the mid of the signal, it knows that. And you can actually control that if you want to. You have a full mid-side configuration right here. You can go between the mid and the sides. But in this case, we've gone full mid because that's what's needed to resolve this. Okay, now each one of these nodes as well has its own cue, attack, and release times. So if we wanted to, for example, speed up the attack a little bit, we could do that. You can multi-select nodes, and you can change parameters together like that. So you can see now we've got both of these set to a faster attack. And you can multi-select them and move them around. And in general, I find that out of the box, this is pretty good at solving the issue. But there's one other thing that I want to show you in here that is very useful, and that is level match. So let's take these guys off of solo, listen to it in the mix. Okay, we can bypass the plugin like this. Listen to it with its on. And I want you to pay attention down here in the bottom left to the input. So you can see here that there is a little white triangle that's floating around. And what that's intended to do is help you to level match the two items. So you know that I put a +6 utility on here that's boosting beyond where the mid-range instrumentation should be. And predictably, Fuser is telling us, hey, this sound is too loud relative to the vocals, in its opinion. And you should reduce it if you agree with me. And in this case, of course I do, because that's not where I had it in the mix. So all you do here is you take the input, you'd reduce it. In this case, it's telling us 4.8 dB. So it's in the ballpark of where the addition of extra level was that I added in. And there we have it. Now, the other neat thing with this plugin that you can do is you can use the A/B. So in this case, I've used the automatic setup, but let's go to B and let's go ahead and see what a manual setup would look like if I wanted to come in and maybe be a bit more specific or precious or surgical about what I want to do. So we have this looped up. What are we seeing? We're seeing that the vocal fundamental is sitting about here. You can double click to add a node. And this is a threshold control. So the lower you have it, the more spectral ducking you're going to get. You're seeing the spectral ducking up top here. Okay. And you can just move this around with your mouse. Now, there are modifier keys that I find very helpful here. So if you want to change the threshold without changing the frequency, which is easy to do if you're just fat fingering it manually, is you can hold down the control key. So if you hover over the node, you hold down control, you see you get these little up and down arrows, and now you're locked to the frequency and you can just change the threshold. And then alternatively, if you want to change the frequency without changing the threshold, you hold the shift key and you can change the frequency up and down the spectrum without modifying the threshold. Okay, so those are very useful if you're wanting to manually dial these in. In this case, I've kind of got myself set up here. Now, yeah, that's taking care of the fundamental frequency of the vocal coming through. I'd speed up the attack a little bit. And I would also change this mid-side balance, right? We only need really in the mid, so there we go. But then we have conflicts that are going on further up that are more in the vocal intelligibility range. So I might go ahead and just add a bell right here. Give us some nice threshold on that. Now this is a fairly narrow bell, and it's kind of a broad frequency range, the vocal intelligibility range. So I might, again, speed up the attack, and I might play with the Q. So we're getting a bit of a wider spectral ducking frequency range. And of course, we can always A/B with the plugin on and off. And we can go back to what the plugin was doing independently. And yeah, that is how this is able to solve spectral ducking, frequency masking with spectral ducking very easily. You know, if you're a pro and you want to get fussy with this, you can go in and you have a lot of manual control. And if you are maybe more of a novice or you just want to get things done really quickly, doing a draft mix, you could go ahead and just use the plugins to resolve conflicts.
The digital age.
Now let's check out the kick drum and see what's going on there. This track has Mark Schulman on drums, who was the drummer for Pink for many years, and it was tracked using a live drum kit, and then we replaced the kick drum to make it more of a dance, EDM-friendly kick. So the kick is done in layers, and this is where the problem lies, because we have two layers overlapping with each other. They have not been topped and tailed, so they're both running the full length of the kick drum. Sometimes you might split a kick and have one sample playing the transient, one sample playing the body, which resolves a lot of problems. But in this case, we have full-length kicks, and both kicks are not being EQ'd. They are full range as well. So if we solo that up, you can hear where the source of the conflict is. Here's the first layer, which is made from the Kick 2 plugin and rendered to audio, so it's a synthesized kick. And then here's a sample kick. And together, we're hearing phase cancellation, which is what makes the kick sound kind of hollow, and it loses its integrity and its punch. So let's go ahead and use Fuser, because it has a wonderful feature to be able to solve this very common issue that doesn't require me to edit the kick drums at all. So it's fast. So we can go ahead and drop Fuser on. We can drop it onto either layer. It doesn't matter in this case. I'm going to put it at the end of the chain. And then we route the other kick drum layer into the sidechain input. So in this case, it's going to be the Kick 2 rendered sample. And we're going to ignore what's happening in the display here, because we're not going to try and solve this using EQ. We are going to solve this using phase rotation. So that brings us down to this area of the plugin. And once the sidechain input is routed correctly, we just need to click this to let the plugin listen to and analyze the signal, and then it's going to make an automatic adjustment. So listen the instant it applies the adjustment to the difference it makes. That's huge, right? Significant. Here's bypassed. Massive difference in the integrity of the kick. Let's listen in the mix.
Is it a gift or a curse? What is this thing called consciousness?
So there's a different approach here that we can take, because this plugin has both zero latency IIR filters, and we also have FIR filters if we want to be more fussy with phase. So we're going to click the AB state. We're going to activate the B state. You can see everything resets down here. We're going to go and flip over to the FIR filter mode. And then if you click this text that says rotate, it's going to change to match. So now we can go ahead and just turn up the matching to 100%. And then we can listen to the two states of the plugin. Either way, that's a dramatic improvement and one that can massively speed up your workflow if you're dealing with kick drum conflicts like this.
Is it a gift or a curse?
For our final example, let's take a look at how we can solve the issues with drum clarity with the kick punching through the bass and masking with that, and the snare getting a little bit lost in the mix. So let's take a look at this section of the song.
We are the beat poets of the digital age. We are the voice of the new generation.
If we go ahead and just solo up the drums, and we solo up the bass, you can hear what I'm talking about here. Let's focus in on the kick drum first. So we'll go ahead and just add the kick into the equation, not the entire drum bus. And let's see what Fuser can do here. In general, I haven't used broadband, sidechain, compression, ducking in years because I find it's just too heavy-handed. So I've always been looking for tools that allow me to be more surgical, that allow the ducking to be more transparent, just getting rid of the frequencies in the places that is needed and leaving the rest of the signal that's the submissive signal untouched. And especially in this case, because this is a really beautiful sounding electric bass played by Will Henshaw, the artist himself, I want to leave it the ducking as transparent as possible and preserve the bass performance. So we're going to take the submissive track, which is in this case the bass, we're going to put Fuser on it. And we're going to route the kick drum into the sidechain input. We're going to let Fuser listen to the signal. And we can see it's reading frequency conflict in the red, which is the mid-range, the mid of the signal, as we'd expect because the kick and the bass are both typically mono or at least center image dominant. So we're going to go ahead and see what it does on its own. Let's just click Resolve Conflicts. Now, it's resolved it. We can hear the kick drum more clearly. But now it's kind of stepping on the bass, right? I'm losing, even though it's spectral, I'm losing too much of the bass. And why is that? So if we go ahead and we just go down here and we take a look at the kick drum samples, you can see what I'm talking about because this kick drum is very long, especially this layer here. It's almost the entire quarter note. So that's causing Fuser to get triggered and it's pushing the ducking down on the bass too much for my liking. We're losing the bass in the mix and we don't want that. So you can do things here like you can play with the Q, you can use your scroll wheel on your mouse to be able to do that. But when we go narrower on the Q, now we're not really getting the ducking effect that we want. So to me, it needs a bit more fussing. And I came up with a alternative way of doing this that involves just a little bit of trickery. So what I did is if you go down to the very bottom here, I created a separate sidechain trigger. And what I did is I rendered the kick drum, both layers, put it into a sampler, and I'm just triggering it in the sampler. We can listen to that. So what I've done is I've taken and shortened the kick sample, right? So we're taking that down and we're just using really the first little portion of the kick there. So what I would do with that now that I think is going to work out a bit better is I'm going to route the sidechain signal. Let's go ahead and solo up the kick in the sub again, kick in the bass. So now we can see we're getting that sidechain signal that's coming through and we're seeing that frequency conflict that's happening. We can play with the length of that sample. And now we can click Resolve Conflicts in Fuser. And one of the settings here that we haven't looked at yet that is very useful for configuring your ducking for kick and bass is the delta signal. So if you click this, now you're going to hear a really good way of setting your attack and release. So I'm going to take the attack right down to as low as it goes. And if we back off the release, now you're hearing the bass coming in, which means it's going to be ducking more of the bass. And we don't want that. So kind of want to set it at the point where we're hearing that kick drum and the release is allowing the bass to spring up when the kick drum is out of the way. So it's a pretty fast release, actually. Pretty fast release. I might even be inclined to, go as low as 50, 55. Okay, so we go off the delta signal. And then it's a matter of, okay, we can play with the threshold. So that's where those modifier keys come in. You can hold the control key. We want to be a bit more heavy-handed. We can do this. We want to be a little lighter. We can bring up the threshold and find the sweet spot, which I think is about there. Let's listen to this in the mix.
Age. We are the voice of the new generation.
Yeah, like that. Okay, and finally, let's deal with the snare. So we can hear the snare is also getting masked. It's getting a bit lost in the rest of the mix. And what I want to do here is take a look at the things that are sitting in the same range as the snare. I don't want the snare to duck the vocals. The vocals are always wanting to be prioritized. But I kind of want everything else, aside from the other drums, to get ducked when the snare comes in. So I've set up this submix called ducking. Here's what's in it. So you can hear all the mid-range instrumentation, the returns, the bass are all in there. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that soloed, and we'll go ahead and solo up the snare. There we go. And we'll go ahead and see what Fuser can do for us here. So let's take a look. We're going to route the snare into the sidechain input. So the plugin is listening now. And again, the snare is also center dominant. And let's click Resolve Conflicts. Nice. Or we want a fast attack. And again, we can use that delta signal to make sure we're not taking out more of the submissive track than we need to. All right, so let's have a listen to the whole mix together.
We are the beat poets of the digital age. We are the voice of the new generation.
Right on. I hope you got a lot of value out of this video and that you're realizing by now how powerful spectral ducking is. I really think it's a go-to next level technique that's going to change the way a lot of engineers work, and it certainly has the capacity to speed up your workflow, especially if you're using that Resolve Conflicts automatic feature. Now, if you want to check out more about Fuser or grab it, there's a link below the video where you can get a fully functional demo or just go ahead and buy it. If you're looking where to go next after this, if you're still in education mode, then I would encourage you to check out the other video that I just did featuring a different Mastering the Mix plugin called Rezo. Rezo helps you address resonances in your mix, and again, has a lot of very useful and innovative features. I did a deep dive with the plugin's developer and product owner. That's Tom Frampton, the founder of Mastering the Mix. And it's about, 55 minutes or an hour deep dive into Rezo. Also a very powerful technique, and I think a very useful plugin. So if you're looking for where to go next, hop into that video. And until next time, happy music making.